What's going on, everybody? I'm back again with another video, and I have to be quiet because I have some people or guests staying at my home and I do not want to wake them up, but I want to get this video out there to you guys. Yesterday you saw my healer 8.3 tier list, and I'll be covering melee DPS in this tier list. Now, there are a lot of viable melee to choose from in this option, and I definitely recommend a melee DPS or a melee DPS class to those who are returning to the game for patch 8.3, as I think they're a little bit more simple than the average healer or range DPS. But with that being said, we're going to hop right into this, and I will be breaking down all of the DPS, the melee DPS options, when you should pick one up, which ones you should avoid, and why that is. Now, hopping right into this, we're going to start off with the Enhancement Shaman. The Enhancement Shaman is by far, in my opinion, one of the weakest melee DPS currently in the patch, and I'm sure there's somebody out there right now watching this that is not like to hear that. However, they haven't seen a lot of love since 8.0. In the beginning of Battle for Azeroth, they were absolutely insane. They did like the most ridiculous amounts of damage, and they provided a substantial amount of healing. Now they do provide decent DPS, but they're really squishy, and then the only comp that you'll really find any success in for an Enhancement Shaman is going to be Turbo with an Arms Warrior. Arms Warrior healer, probably Arms Warrior, Mistweaver, Enhancement Shaman, but even then it's not that strong of a comp, and they're very weak in 2v2s. I do not recommend this class. As much as you might want to play one, just steer away from it from now. Maybe pick it up as an alt in the future, but for now, steer clear of this class. Now, hopping into the next class here, we're going to be jumping into the Retribution Paladin. The Retribution Paladin does have some comp options, but right now the comp options that they do have aren't the strongest, and that's why I'm currently placing it in the D tier. They do a lot of damage. They provide humongous burst, and they're not as bad as Enhancement Shamans. I could definitely place them in the C tier, but I wanted to create a wide spread on this graph. I wanted to have each tier filled, and I wanted to kind of differentiate between the tiers. And although I think they're a little bit better than the Enhancement Shaman, I think that they're somewhat viable. Cupid is not being really seen, has not been seeing any play, and in 2v2s, they're just not the best. So currently, I'm going to place them in the D tier. Sorry, Savix, but they're fun to play. I honestly don't think I would recommend the Ret right now, but I'm not against you picking up a Retribution Paladin if you really want to play one, because they're a lot of fun, and I don't think they're as bad as the Enhancement Shaman. Now, hopping into another hybrid melee DPS, and that's going to be the Feral Druid. The Feral Druid actually does have some viable comp options. They're not that bad in 2v2s, and they're not that bad in 3v3s. They do have jungle available to them, and you can also play like Feral Druid Destruction Warlock. However, it's really hard to pull off or be a successful Feral right now because you're limited to amount of comps. The comps that you do have to play are like jungle, and that requires a lot of setup, a lot of knowledge, a lot of survivability, and you have to know how to deal damage. And every Feral I've ever played with, for some reason, just can't do any damage. They're very squishy, and they're just better melee DPS out there. I'd rather have you pick up a Retribution Paladin over a Feral if you're new to the game, because Feral is a little bit more complicated, and you have to know when to Cyclone, you have to know how to keep your bleeds, you have to know how to burst, you have to just know how to be a supportive DPS and a damage dealer, and I think it's just too much work. It requires too much work to be successful at the class when you can pick up another melee DPS, which in my opinion requires a lot less work and is a lot more effective. So currently I'm placing Feral in the C tier. However, jungle is still a strong comp, and there are other options out there for you, just not one that I'm currently recommending for patch 8.3. All right, now hopping into the Survival Hunter. Survival Hunter will also be placed in the C tier alongside of the Feral Druid. I'm not saying the C tier is like not viable at all. I think but all classes outside of the Enhancement Shaman, in my opinion, are a lot more viable. You can find some definite success in 2v2s as a Survival Hunter, and you can find some success in 3v3s. You have just about the same comp options as the Feral Druid. You can be paired with a Retribution Paladin for Cupid, but it's not seeing a lot of play. You can be paired with a Feral Druid like I talked about earlier for jungle. That does see some play, and there's some other comp options with like a Shadow Priest Hunter, but again, they're just not that strong. They're very squishy. And although they're decent in 2s, they're just not currently the best melee DPS. However, I do think they're a lot of fun and a unique class. If you're into hunters, it might be something you want to explore. Just once again, not a class that I'm heavily recommending at this current point in time. Okay, now moving on to the classic bread and butter Arms Warrior, and I'm going to be placing the Arms Warrior actually in the B tier. Arms Warriors have a lot of comp options available to them, but they're just a little bit subpar compared to the other melee DPS options in this list. and they just lack a lot of survivability, which they always have. They deal a lot of damage. They have a big supportive role. They're pretty decent in 2v2s. That's why they get the B tier. The comps that they used to be really good in aren't as prevalent as they used to be, like TSG, that being Death Knight Arms Warrior. It's just not as good as like Windwalker DK or even DK DH. They're just not very mobile. They don't have the survivability, but they are a great starter class. Do I recommend the Warrior at this current point in time? Yeah, I do. I think if you're into playing a melee DPS, you want to play an Arms Warrior, I wouldn't recommend against it, but I just don't think that they're as good as some of the other melee DPS. So if you're in a position where you're coming back to the game and you want to play an Arms Warrior, should you pick one up or pick something else? I think pick it up. But if you want to pick the absolute top tier melee DPS, I just can't go with the Arms Warrior right now. Now, a class that's actually responsible for the Arms Warrior kind of moving down on this tier list is the Windwalker Monk. The Windwalker Monk is absolute bananas right now. They just saw some recent buffs to like Rising Sun Kick, and they were already pretty strong, but now they're just dealing absurd amounts of damage. They also have really good survivability, and they provide that Mortal Strike effect that the Arms Warrior does have. So I think the Windwalker Monk right now is just a better version of the Warrior. I think it has greater mobility. Well, obviously it does. Way better survivability in my opinion. And it's just providing almost more damage, more burst. It's way more disruptive. They're really good in 2v2s right now. They're probably one of the best melee DPS in the game right now. I mean, they are in the S tier, but I think they're definitely up there compared to some of the other melee. And they're just good in all aspects. 3s, 2s, and everything you can think of. Mortal Strike, survivability, support, utility, they have it all. They're a complete package, and I would highly recommend the Windwalker Monk to anyone that wants to pick up a class or a melee DPS right now for patch 8.3. They're a lot of fun, and I mean, monks are pretty cool in general. So I'm going to give them the S tier spot. These buffs definitely paid off, and they are currently one of the strongest melee DPS at this point. Now, a class that's typically paired well with the Arms Warrior and the Windwalker Monk is the Death Knight. Unholy and Frost are both viable specs, and you could easily place this class in the A tier or the S tier. It's completely up to you. Just for like a better graph spread, I'm going to be placing in the A tier. That does not mean they could not be placed in the S tier. I think Windwalker DK is probably one of the best melee cleave comps in the game, but in my opinion, it has a lot to do with the Windwalker Monk and not as much to do with the Unholy Death Knight or the Frost Death Knight. Now, Frost Death Knights are really strong in 3s, not so strong in 2s, and the Unholy is just good in both. However, Frost Death Knight just provides a crazy amount of burst with Chill Streak, and Unholy has the necrotic effect for 2v2s. I think the Unholy Death Knight and the Death Knight in general is just a super solid class for players to pick up that are coming back to the game. I highly recommend the Death Knight. Don't look at this chart and be like, well, why did you put it in the A tier, or should I not play it? Honestly, anything A and above is a really solid pick. Anything B and above is a very solid pick. And I think the Death Knight is going to stay around for a while. It's been strong for almost all of BFA, and I continue or believe it'll continue to do so. So definitely a solid class to pick up. I think it's a lot of fun and one that I recommend. All right, now moving on to the class that everyone hates, and for some reason there's two of them on this chart, the Demon Hunter. Now, the Demon Hunter is definitely one of the best 2v2 classes in the game currently for melee DPS alongside Windwalker Monks and Death Knights. They have pretty much everything except Immortal Strike. They have high mobility, high damage, high supportive utility. They're just a fun class to play, in my opinion, and it's a very easy class to pick up. There are some ins and outs to the class that, you know, might require a little bit of, you know, knowledge, but if you're just trying to hop into the game and want to do a lot of damage right away, it's really easy to pull that off on the Demon Hunter. I'm going to be placing the Demon Hunter in the A tier. I know it's going to surprise a lot of people because at a lower rating, I'm sure you're just seeing a shitload of Demon Hunters and they just roll over you because they deal so much damage. But they don't actually have a lot of comps available to them in 3v3s. The only comp that you really can have some success with the Demon Hunter is DH Warrior, which I expect to be a little bit weaker this season, and DK DH. There are some Windwalker DH, Windwalker DH comps available to you as well, but Windwalker DK I think is a lot better than Windwalker DH. And again, DH I feel like is really good paired with something that's also very good, not just like Windwalker Monk, where you can literally just slap a Windwalker Monk into almost any comp and it's going to be successful. Again, you could put the Demon Hunter and the Death Knight in the S tier. It just depends how you want to have this graph look, or how you want to spread it out. Again, just for representation purposes, for the purpose of this video, I want to have an even spread, and I'm placing the Demon Hunter in the A tier. Very strong in 2s, easy to play, great utility, has mana burn, super solid class, and I highly recommend you pick one up if you're interested in doing so. Okay, now for the last melee of this tier, it is the Rogue. The Assassination Rogue. Primarily, sub has some use cases, and I think it's pretty solid, but we're just going to be talking about Assassination for, you know, just the purpose of this video. The Assassination Rogue is going to take the S tier. Has been the S tier pretty much this entire expansion. Rogues are always really good. Assassination Rogue, almost any mage variant, is extremely powerful. It's great in 3s, it's great in 2s. If you're into BGs or whatever, it's also good there. I'm not really including that in this video, but it's also good there. I just think it's not as simple as some of the other melee DPS. I know that people say it's really easy, but I just see so many rogues suck that it's hard for me to say that you should just pick one up if you're returning to the game. You know, it's not just about DRing kidneys, it's about knowing how to cover sheeps for your mage if you're playing rogue mage. It's about like spreading bleeds, maintaining them, not taking too much damage, feigning at the right times. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do, rather than just playing a Death Knight where you can never be slowed, never be stunned, and you can just always just, you know, run through Ring of Peace, and it's almost impossible for you to die. Similar to the Demon Hunter, it's really hard for you to die, and as an Assassination Rogue, it's pretty easy to fall over if you don't know what you're doing. So I'm not saying it's a really difficult class, but I'm just thinking, I'm trying to say that's a little bit more complicated, excuse me, than the other ones in this video. So Assassination Rogue, extremely strong. If you played a rogue before and you want to pick one up, it's always a good time to pick up a rogue. It's always a good time to play a rogue. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's my tier list. These are the classes that I recommend. These are the classes that I don't recommend. If you have any questions, you can let me know in the comment section below. And if you're looking for your own personalized coaching, inexpensive coaching, you can support me on Patreon somewhere here on the screen. And you can also earn yourself some coaching at the same time. But with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.